So moving on to the question. Yes, please.
Hello, I am an auditor of financial statements, so I have a question about audited financial statements. I felt like we needed a boring question here. Like so. Earlier we hinted at the importance of audited financials, and of course, a startup at some stages it might just be a bank account and a credit card. And I wanted to see, at what point does it actually matter? Is it seed funding, is it Series A, or all the way to M&A? When would it actually matter?
I don't think, and Mitch can talk, I don't think most venture capitalists require audited financial statements, certainly not early on. A lot of private equity firms don't either. I think it's when you see an exit, either an IPO or an M&A within 2 years or maybe within 3 years, you start to do that. I think you start to worry about it. But I think the expense of that early stage, I think the venture capitalists want it to go to the company, the growth of the company. They think they're smart enough to figure out the financials themselves. And they don't, maybe the limited partners required. I mean, I have done deals where venture capitalists have required audit financials, but I think that's more the exception. I think it's when you're getting ready for an exit that you start to think about it.
Yeah, it's really only ready for the exit. There are some cases we just did like 6 months before the exit. We just quick chop audit financial statement. Really, we don't want to spend any money on that side. I think that's the majority of people think.
Yeah, I will say I see like in deals a lot where you almost know when they're getting it ready to sell because they might switch auditors, right? They might go upstream to get an auditor because they want to go IPO or M&A, and for sort of public companies or larger companies, audited financial statements matter. And so when you start seeing a lot of changes at sort of the auditor level, my sense is something's coming about 2 years down the road, and so you don't track that. So yeah, it doesn't matter for startups. In fact, auditing is seen as a commodity, and it's painful. They don't want to enjoy it, or they don't enjoy it. But as you get ready for the sale, they'll appreciate the benefits of an audited financial statement.
I mean, probably from your perspective, audited financials are probably lower on your list of things you don't care about, even below IP, right?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So next question is please.
I'm Counsel from Doucette. I think the company could be the larger Japanese company, and we have acquired a lot of companies all over the world. But mainly that is for market consolidation or extension. So thinking about the acquiring the early stage companies, it makes us controversial that whether we should purchase the company or just being the strategic investor by having some sort of sweet amount of stake. So could you please share your comments on that from practical standpoint?
I think a high percentage of these early stage M&As do come from existing investors. I think that's a good way to test the water. You put a few $1 million in rather than hundreds of millions of dollars in. You sit on the board, you start to get to know the management team well, you get to know the engineers, you get to know the technology, and then you make that play later. I think that's a much better way. I mean, the private equity guys do that a lot. They'll come in, take half the company, and they'll realize they want the rest, or they realize they don't want it. So I do think to test the waters, it's a good way to make some strategic investments, have some rights. Don't take too many rights, because then the company won't be able to grow. Too many exclusive, that's one of the problems. Sometimes you're very happy to get money from a strategic partner, but if they make it so exclusive or they tie you up so much, and it's hard to talk to anybody else, now you only have one seller. So from your point of view, you want to get exclusive, tie them up, and then buy them for a cheap price. But I think that's a strategy, clearly.
I think our expression for that is try before you buy.
All right. Any other questions? Okay.
Dennis, I have a question for you. As I'm dealing with some really breakthrough technology startups, And when I bring up the name that a Japanese company would like to talk to you, they're based on their impressions, they really don't want to talk. They say, I feel like my new idea will be given away, as you were mentioning, right? What can be done to take away that concern which is fair to both parties? Any comment on that? Thank you.
Well, again, ultimately, it does come down to trust. And if in fact, any investor, any buyer has a good reputation in the market, not stealing ideas or stealing companies or treating people poorly, then, it's worth that interview, it's worth that discussion. Because again, it doesn't have to be successful. I mean, you can talk to them and figure out what they're interested in and see if there is a fit. Because a lot of times, after the first meeting, there is no fit, there is no chemistry, and you just go your separate ways. But sometimes there's a real good synergy, and it's worth having that further discussion. So I think Japan does have good intellectual property rights compared to some other countries that we won't discuss. And they're as strong as the U.S. rights. So I think that's not an issue as with some other countries. I think, again, part of it, your job, our job, is to make the case. I mean, the smallest startup that wants to be part of a larger company, either on a strategic license or a sale, got to figure out how it works inside that company. Who's the champion in that company? Because you make that person look smart, then you look smart, and they're willing to pay for that. So I tell my startups, they have to do their homework. If they want to talk to Google, they're not going to get a first meeting until they understand who at Google is the right person, who's the right connection, who knows who, how the venture capitalists can help, things like that. So you got to do your homework and convince them there's a fit, because this piece fits in that piece, and that 1 + 1 is 10, not just 3.
Okay, any other questions? We still have 10-15 minutes. Okay, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Neo Miyabe. Asakura-san's earlier question covered most of the points I wanted to ask, but I guess my question is to Dennis on a little bit of detailed transaction aspects of talent acquisition, talent retention. I'm from a traditional M&A industry, so in case of public company transaction, people typically avoid having any discussions around management retention or compensation post-transaction until basic terms, including price, is agreed. Obviously, that process doesn't make perfect sense in case of startup acquisition, especially if the talent is the main motivation of the acquisition. So I guess my questions are twofold. One is from buyer's perspectives, how do people avoid having any potential legal issues around conflict of interest while making sure that the management and the key employees will be kept motivated? And secondly, from investors' perspective, how is there any way you can avoid having that sort of conflict of interest in the exit transaction?
Yeah, from the buyer's perspective, I mean, the buyer wants to meet with as many of the senior management and the talent as possible, as quickly as possible, to see if it's worth their time. And obviously the seller's putting their hands up and saying, no, you can only talk to these 3 people until we sign, a definitive agreement. And so it is tricky. And again, there's that trust element. You trust this buyer to not steal your technology, not steal your people, because even if the contract says they can't do that, there's that risk that occurs and things like that. So I think the buyer usually has the upper hand. Usually the buyer knows the technology, knows the key people and stuff, knows the science and stuff, and usually they can, if they don't, they can ask around and see who's the leading people in that particular field, and they can avoid liability for almost all of that, even under non-disclosure and stuff like that, if they're focused and know what they're doing. But there's always the risk that the deal falls apart and the target gets upset and sues the buyer for stealing confidential information or trade secrets or people and things like that. Those things happen a lot. It's not a way to minimize that, but I think there has to be an element of trust that you can look at these certain documents or these certain people, and then after that, next round, next round, next round. So sometimes there's 3 or 4 rounds of interviews, or there's 3 or 4 rounds of looking at the IP and stuff like that. It's a gradual process, and the trust just gets built up that people say they're going to do certain things, and they do. We're even talking to customers, if they have customers, you know, the interviews come back, the feedback comes back, it's positive, professional, they're doing the right thing. So I think the buyer, well managed, can do that. But again, the buyer needs to talk to all the key people and feel comfortable they're going to stay on with the incentives they're providing.
So they already have set incentive?
Well, I think some of them have, you know, they've done a lot of deals, and so they offer a similar package, and they start talking to them about this is what we typically do. There's not a formal offer, but this is what we typically do, and they talk to them about that.
Okay, so one last question.
I want to hear about the touchy-feely stuff. I want to hear about how much you care about the culture of the merged entity and what you do before the M&A to make sure that it's positioned for the best possible chance of success of merging 2 company cultures.
Yeah, but I can say that there's almost a inherent built-in structure to some of these companies that don't make it work, and it's like mind-boggling because you have corporate development whose mandate is to close a deal, and as soon as that deal closes, they're on to the next deal, and they're handing it off, and then you have another team that is responsible for sort of integrating it the first year, and they hand it off, and then you have another team that's responsible for sort of maybe tracking synergies, and so I think one of the ways for better do it is have someone sort of quarterback that whole process, because you know you have a whole lot of handoffs in the corporate culture, and everyone has their sort of their own mandate to do something, and that's sort of ingredients for a deal killer. And I think you need to sort of create more linkage between sort of pre-deal, close, post-close, and then development years on. And I don't know what that secret sauce is, but it certainly is just bringing the teams together. And certainly because a failed deal is going to be that. It's going to be culturally, they didn't do their diligence, and no one's tracking it.
Which sounds like
yeah, I think that's when I think at least some of like people like Cisco or Google, they seem to know how to work out on those kind of things in some level. But when I see some other company, like especially Japanese companies, they have no idea what to do after the acquisition, and usually they decide what to do after they buy a company. And I know that some of the cases, like a company send an engineer to Japan and ask them to live in Japan for a couple of years, and obviously nobody want to do that, and that deal was totally screwed up. And so, yeah, I think it's somehow that's the most neglected part in terms of culture, and a lot of people, and I think that's go back to the chat story too, because people who do the due diligence, they look at the technical and the people side, they don't look at the culture side. So I think somebody, maybe the chief culture officer or something like that, I don't know, somebody like that has to be involved in acquisition, that maybe.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that you've got to understand the target has culture, and you want to take the best parts of that culture to the extent you can and bring it in and pick and choose the best practices of any company that you bring in. And you can't just say this is, well, you can't say this is the HP way, that was a great culture, it always has been. But some companies just say this is our way, we do it, and we don't care. And Silicon Valley engineers and smart people, they do care. And if they get to bring their dog to work every Friday, they want to bring their dog to work, you know, and it's not in the employee handbook, and it's not in the manual, but you walk the plant, you'll see it, and you just, if you can accommodate that, that's going to help the culture, and it's going to go a long way. If you're so corporate, and Silicon Valley's not so corporate, but other parts of the country, the suits, the ties, all that sort of stuff, people don't feel comfortable in that environment, and that's, I think, part of it is walking the halls prior to the deal happening, talking to people, the receptionist, talking, you know, what's important, why do you like this company, you know, and and understanding that, and to the extent you can make that work in the bigger company, great. A lot of times you can, but if you don't even care that and know that it exists, even little things like benefits or, you know, whatever, that's just things that go a long way, because otherwise some of the people think it's a huge change. And not only that, you're taking stuff away from you. It should be better in every respect. And if you feel like you're taking little things away from them, a lot of times it doesn't go well.
Yeah, they actually just jog my memories, because a lot of my clients from outside of Silicon Valley who were targeting companies here, it was, you know, the targets were saying, well, what's my benefits? And they're like, well, here's our package. You get a 401k and you get 2 weeks vacation. and they were like, it's a non-starter. It really is a non-starter for them. And so they have to, corporate America has to, I mean, there's no avoiding it. Technology is a disruptor, and you're either going to embrace it or you're going to be left behind. And the best way to sort of embrace it is to adapt it back to their culture. And it's the flexibility. You made the story of bringing your dog to work. It's absolutely true. And if you try that in corporate, then you get thrown out by a security guard. And you have to sort of, there's going to be some change, and it's going to be lessons learned probably the hard way if they don't adopt.
Yeah, so I guess I'd say that, you know, you're absolutely right, you should try to identify that. I'm not sure there's a formula you can follow in terms of, okay, what's your culture, and then, you know, be able to check it off and identify it. It could be simple things like letting the target employees live where they're currently living, right? So for example, if you have a startup in Silicon Valley that gets acquired by a company in North Dakota, and the acquirer wants to move everybody to North Dakota, people will be like, no. Right? So it could be things like that, right? So you have to make some compromises if you're the buyer. Maybe you need to keep them as a independently running sub rather than rolling them up into your company. Maybe you need to, if you have a sort of company policy, and, you know, for example, if you have this, you know, everything needs to be filled out in triplicate, and you know that the target is gonna hate that, maybe you don't force that on them, right? So I mean, it's things like that, but it's hard to speak in the abstract about what all those factors are, right? Human beings are all different. You got, for the team you want to acquire, you need to identify what they care about, right?
So perhaps I should ask each speaker to give some kind of final remarks before joining the session. I'm sorry that we are running out of time, so could you quickly make final remarks? Chat, please.
Yeah, I mean, sitting with the panel, it's much sort of a learning exercise for me as it is sort of my ability to share some of my stories. I think it's what I find fascinating is that each from our perspective we're sort of seeing the same thing, the same challenges. Right, early stage investing is unique, and you need to be able to sort of, you know, leverage kind of what happens in the traditional M&A space, but it's also to adopt to the way it changes rapidly, the culture, and then thinking through technology and how quickly it evolves. So again, it's just, one, I like the opportunity to be able to talk in front of you all, and thank you for giving me that opportunity, but also thank the rest of the panel because it gave me the opportunity to learn from a different perspective.
In case you didn't know, everybody in Silicon Valley is an entrepreneur. The guy that drives that Uber car, the guy that flips your pizza, they all have a great idea. And you gotta embrace that, you know, where a lot of cultures don't embrace that. You know, it's very much hierarchical. Silicon Valley is a little bit hierarchical, but everyone's an entrepreneur here. There's a great ecosystem, and you gotta foster that in order to take advantage of it. You gotta support and promote that to take advantage of it. If you just say, no, this is how we do things in my country or in my company, you probably aren't going to be the leading candidate to do a deal with a Silicon Valley company.
Not much to say, but I think the early stage M&A is going to be continue to be happening here. But it's not, I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's not like something is suddenly it's happened, like somebody come and buy you in $1 billion or something like that. It's usually happening from your partners or the business partner. So you're gonna have to continue to build a business no matter what. I think that M&A it could be at the end of the goal, but it's actually building the products and the company is the basic things have to continue to do it.
Yes, my perspective is M&A is a tool, and you know you can use that tool in certain ways. it may work better in some cultures than others, you know, like for Japanese companies, they tend not to acquire as many other companies. And typically when you see, or a lot of Japanese companies is two big companies merging, you know, to save on costs or things. You don't have as much of, you know, big company acquiring a little company. There may be cultural reasons for that. It might be because of, you know, the lifetime employment that, you know, with a high failure rate for M&A, you don't want to hire a whole bunch of people if those acquisitions are not going to be successful, right? Whereas in the US, we don't quite have that same system, so I think the US system and the US culture in some ways lends itself more to using that as a tool. But you just have to see how it fits in kind of with your company or your culture, you know, and whether you can use it or not.
Thank you. As a moderator, I learned a lot from today's very, very interactive session. Although unfortunately I have to go back to Japan tomorrow noon, but hopefully I will have the next opportunity to join this session sooner or later. So thank you very much for everyone, and this concludes the discussion. And now back to you.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. As a program manager, I was so surprised that this program was so nice, so interesting and exciting. And we are planning to hold a forum regarding potential California cooperation in green tech in next coming June here. So if you are interested in, if you are interested in this forum, please come here again and spend some time to join this forum. And we will be posting updated information on the Keizai Silicon Valley website. And please also subscribe to our mailing list to get the latest information on our website. We hope to see you again at the future Keizai Silicon Valley event. So from now on, we need to leave building before 9 p.m. So we have only 30 minutes or so, but please feel free to chat and network until before 9 p.m. Thank you very much for coming today.